You ever wonder how foster care works? Like, what the process looks like, why people become foster parents? Like, I don't know how it works for other people, but I will tell you how and why I did it and how this whole process works in the first week of my foster care month celebration and fundraiser. I'm going to continue to workshop that name. Before I get too far in, I want to ask you for two favors. The first is to hit the like button, obviously, because I think what I have to say this month is vastly more important than the normal entertainment videos that I usually make, and that like tells YouTube to show this video to more people. The second favor I want to ask is that you watch the whole thing, even if you put me on 2x speed, turn the volume down, and just let me roll. In addition to the fundraising, the ad money from these foster care videos is going to go to the same charity, which I'm going to talk about at the end. More watch time, though, again, tells the YouTube machine to show this thing off to more people.
For 15 cents, 15 little pennies, you can change one of these children's life.
With that out of the way, I want to tell you my foster care story. I should call it my journey. Kind of makes it sound cooler. This could be like a story time. Is that still a thing on YouTube? What makes my foster care journey different from others that you may have heard of or may be imagining is that it was super easy. Barely an inconvenience. Very little drama. And I used to be kind of embarrassed about that. I had pretty bad imposter syndrome and probably survivor guilt or some equivalent label. The foster care system gets a bad rap. Some of it very deserving. Quick plug for week 2. Next week, I'm going to spill some tea about the system, but it's not 100% a nightmare hellscape, as I am evidence. I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and he asked me if I was ever going to talk about my story in videos, and I said, I don't know. Like, usually I just talk about entertainment stuff, and I tell terrible jokes. Like, that's my thing, but mostly I'm not sure because I kind of feel like a fraud. I've had it so easy, even I can't believe it sometimes. And he encouraged me, and he said, look, that's exactly why you should talk about it. Because everybody thinks foster care is tantamount to one of the lower circles of hell, and that can be a deterrent. You should tell a positive story, so it's not all doom and gloom. There's value in that side of it. So, thank you, Brad. I'm going to do just that. First up, why foster care, or anything like it? The truth is, I hadn't planned on doing any of this, but like Jake and Elwood, I'm on a mission from God.
We were sent by him who is called I Am.
Seriously though, I felt called by God to do this, and unfortunately it wasn't one of the cool ways like seeing a tornado from a cave mouth or a multi-eyed divine messenger. Honestly, maybe fortunately, some of those messages sound pretty terrifying, and they usually involve a high chance of martyrdom.
It's gonna be deadly dangerous with a good chance of death.
Nah, it was the regular way. I had just set up a table and a cup of tea and my Bible for a nice Instagram photo, and I was reading and I came to the parable of the talents. Now, parables were stories that Jesus would tell about earthly things, and they were meant to illustrate some kind of spiritual lesson. And a talent was a unit of money. Now, you can look this up if you want to in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30, but the basic gist is that a master of a house was going to go on a trip and gave 3 servants various amounts of money and expected them to do something productive. 2 of the servants did just that, investing in some way, and they saw returns, and they were rewarded. And one servant buried the money and sat on it. Then he gave it back, and he was punished. Now, it's important to note this story is not really about money. It's illustrating that God, the master in this story, gives us, the servants, things, and we should be stewarding them in some way that is productive for him. And as I read this, it occurred to me that I have quite a bit. I can't really pretend to be like rich, but I also can't say that I'm struggling, honestly. I'm very comfortable. I have some luxuries. I've got a comfortable home here, a happy marriage. I had 5 kids at that time with basically no health issues worth mentioning. I've got a good relationship with all my kids, and I have the opportunity to not only be the only earner in this house, but I also still have the extra time to spend with everyone. By almost any measure, I'm living the absolute dream.
I'm immune to stuff you've never even heard of.
But not immune to braggadocio.
So I read those verses, and I felt very strongly the question, and what are you doing with all of that? And I immediately attempted to tell myself, well, I'm raising these kids for the Lord, and I'm being a light to the world, and all those other things that we sometimes say in church, like simply living correctly and following God's basic decrees is some kind of mission work, which it's not, and neither are our hobbies while we're on the subject. Like if I were to take up hockey, but I'm not aggressive and I show good sportsmanship, that does not qualify as hockey for Jesus. So these verses are not letting me wiggle away. And I realize that if there's one thing that I have a lot of experience with and I'm equipped to do, it's raise kids. I've got the space, I've got 5 previous trial runs, extra clothes, toys, crib, a huge van. I'm ready. The next question was adoption or foster care. And I was leaning adoption at first because honestly, hadn't even considered anything else. That's the popular option. But my wife asked, why do we need to grow our family? If we're supposed to be using these resources, why not use them to help multiple kids instead of just one? And that was an excellent point, even if it didn't go that way. So I called the county, all gung-ho about this, ready to dive in.
Let's do this. Leroy Dragon!
Now, foster care involves a lot of paperwork, which makes sense. We're dealing with wards of the state here. A paper trail seems like it would be important. So a guy from DCFS came to my house, and he's got a welcome packet. I'm filling this thing out. I'm listening to his spiel, and I get toward the end, and there is a self-questionnaire checklist. Anytime I veer from videos about movies and shows and I talk about like pop culture stuff, I usually tell you guys that service is among the highest virtues to strive for. And foster care is a special kind of service because it involves you seating yourself at the absolute lowest seat at the table. The self-assessment questions were things like, are you ready to support a child in a religion other than yours? Are you ready to abide by parental wishes even if you don't agree with them? Are you ready to have your home inspected? People all in there, have caseworkers in your house. And most importantly, are you ready to support the goal of reunification? No. 2 things to keep in mind about being a foster parent. 1, you are everybody's last priority. The child is the most important, and their parents still have rights. So you have to get the parents' permission to like cut their hair, take them certain places, especially over a state line. And if the parents don't agree with like your religion, you can't take their child to your service. And all of this makes sense, just can be a real pain. But the second thing that you need to know is that everyone in DCFS and the legal system will be working toward getting that kid back to their parents right up until the second it becomes crystal clear they cannot do so and a judge says so. If you're thinking of growing your family through foster care, I really hope I can disabuse you of that notion. Not only will you likely have your heart torn out, if and when the system realizes you're trying to use them as an adoption service, they will blacklist you. Reunification is priority 1. And I was not ready for that. I was ready for the other stuff. I was ready to put myself last in regard to the child, but I was not ready to put a child back in a home with a parent that I was already considering to be unworthy of it. If I got a child who was removed from a house with a chronic drug user or who had been abused in some way, I was not prepared to give them back under any circumstance. I was not ready to help the parents, only the kids.
No. Hard pass. Hard pass.
That questionnaire tripped me up for over a year. Now, eventually, I gathered myself. We talked to our older kids, they were on board, and then we committed. Sort of. Okay, so my toxic trait is I'm a habitual foot dragger. So the paperwork, the background checks, the fingerprinting that I had to do took me probably a month or 2 or 3, longer than it needed to. You have to toddler-proof your house, then you have to go through some training. My day job involves shift work, so my wife and I tackled this part differently. She went to the classes physically, and I did it online with video modules. If you are considering foster care, I highly suggest the in-person classes. The instructors are foster parents and caseworkers with experience. You get to ask your questions. My wife got way more out of her training than I did from mine. You also have to make some choices about what situations you can work with. And I got to play the very first round of a super fun game called Which Option is More Racist? You do get to set boundaries for yourself and your family. And one question they're going to ask is, will you foster kids of a different ethnicity? So, first round, is it more racist to refuse kids with a different skin tone, or is it more racist to think that you can foster kids with cultural and hygienic needs that you don't have experience with? Which one do you think is right?
Nope. Wrong.
It's such a great game, and according to the internet, whatever choice you made was wrong.
It's important to remember one thing. You're wrong. Here's why.
You also have to decide on gender and age. Now, each state has regulations on room size, and our boy room was already full, so we had to go with a girl. Also, most advice that I've seen on the subject says that adopting or fostering kids out of age order can be stressful to your biological kids. So, since our younger kid was 4 at the time, we said 4 and under. Also, you should bear in mind that kids with special medical needs will count as 2 because they need extra attention. Finally, we got it all together, and we got the license, and then we waited for the phone call. Now, my very first actual placement was a kid that I never got to meet, and I'll spill the details on that next week.
Major drama. Spill the tea, sweetheart.
My first placement that I actually met was my now daughter. Yeah, I started this whole thing with the intent to catch and release, helping as many kids and families as I could, and in that regard, I failed. I got 1. They called and said, "Can you take an infant, just a couple of days old?" And we were like, "Yeah, absolutely. Sleep is for the weak. Why not?" The next day, my wife went to the hospital for the easiest delivery that we've ever had, and the journey had officially begun. That was in late 2019, and just a few short months later, the entire world came to a halt, which delayed our case and backed up the entire system. That's when we were also babysitters for a while. Another reason I recommend you go to in-person classes is because you will meet other new foster parents. You can call each other for advice and support, or do play dates when you all get placements, which is cool for your foster kids so they don't feel so out of place in the world. So, my wife made a friend, and as luck would have it, she also had an infant placed with her around the same time as us, but she's got one of those stupid job things. Do not recommend them. 2 out of 10. Only good for the money.
The world.
So when the world melted down in March of 2020, she couldn't find a daycare, but through the magic of a support system, we were able to act as one for a few months. The next couple of years were pretty normal. The only difficulty being the long wait once it became clear that our kid was not going to be going home. They asked if we'd be willing to make this arrangement more permanent, which we agreed to immediately because by that time, we loved her. And that's the big risk with foster care, like any good relationship, but also the entire point. You put your whole heart into it and you devote yourself to someone. And yeah, there's a risk you'll be crushed, but holding yourself back for fear of failure defeats the whole process. These kids don't just need a safe place to live. More importantly, they need love. And more importantly, they need to understand that they are worthy of being loved. There is potential sadness involved in this process, but these kids are worth it. You can find plenty of foster parents who have had to send kids back home, and it broke their hearts into 1,000 pieces. What you'll have a hard time finding are foster parents who regret this, because these kids are important, and they are worth the cost. Oh, I didn't think I was going to be able to get through that part.
It's enough to make a grown man cry, and that's okay.
So we carried on for a few years, living a normal family life. At first, not believing that this amazing girl could actually be our daughter. Just waiting for a relative to appear, and then getting anxious as things solidified more, but we had to wait at the speed of government. Now, the funny thing is that the legal finality of it was a huge relief, and we celebrated, of course, but our daughter didn't really get what was going on. At just shy of 4, we explained it, but I don't really think she got it because she'd been living with us since she was 6 days old. What she did understand is that once we were officially her mom and dad, we had the right to get her ears pierced just like her older sisters. So, after the judgment that morning, we got ice cream and we headed to get earrings. But now I need your help because I'm capped out for a couple of years. Unless a sibling enters the system, the state of Illinois says 6 is the maximum, and they are very serious about it. We told them we'd keep the license and foster more, but that rule is apparently pretty solid, so I have to wait until my oldest turns 18, then there will only be 5 minors here, and I'm going back in. I hope you will consider getting your license. That's why I'm doing these videos, and the fundraiser. I'm certain that you've heard the foster care horror stories, and you can imagine all the ways that it could go wrong. But what if everything went extremely right? And beyond any personal gain that you might receive, the important thing is that there are kids who need help, and serving them is the right thing to do, and doing the right thing is its own justification. If you have any questions about anything foster care related or my experience, I'll be doing a Q&A at the end of this month to cap this fundraiser off, so put your questions in the comments and I'll read them out. If you don't want it public, my email address is in the About section on my page, and you can send me your questions there, and I will do everything I can to get you the answer. I really appreciate you sticking around. It helps spread the video. If you are interested in the fundraiser, it's Safe Families for Children. As I'll talk about next week, I actually dislike the foster care system. It's broken beyond belief, and I wish we didn't need it. Safe Families' mission is to prevent the state from ever having to intervene for a child. They support whole families so they can thrive without a judge needing to give orders, and I really hope you'll consider giving to them. Come back next week as I'll be spilling some tea about the foster system and some of the dumb crap that I've seen. If you're watching this in the future, hopefully I have remembered to come back here and link that video right there. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.